Hey folks, a very quick introduction to today's episode. My name is James Caton, and today we speak with Rick Lievano, Telco Industry CTO at Microsoft. The telco industry is quite specialized, so this is a really on-target conversation. We talk about the four distinct pillars where Microsoft and partners can bring value to telcos, elevating customer experiences, optimizing business processes, modernizing networks, and unlocking new revenue streams. We also talk about the paradigm of deploying AI agents as domain experts in telco business processes. So a wonderful conversation with Rick. I really enjoyed it. I think you will also. And as a quick reminder, these conversations are part of a series of interviews that are also published as an Agentic AI Transformation Playbook. Check the show notes for the download. And if you enjoy these kinds of conversations, share it with a friend, hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and you can find us on YouTube as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Listen on. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's session. We have Rick Lievano from Microsoft. He is our CTO for the telecommunications industry, and today's topic is industry trends in what's new in AI agents. So agentic industry trends in telco. Rick, welcome. How are you today?
Hey, thanks, James. I'm doing great. It's in the afternoon, right after lunch. Forgive me if I start dozing off, but maybe the topic will be interesting enough that I'll manage to stay awake. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure it will be. So, Rick, can you walk us through what you're seeing in the industry today on AI agents? What are the opportunities? What are the trends? What are the customer insights that we can share with our GSI partners and our broader community?
Yeah, super. It's actually been a really exciting 18 months. ChatGPT released November 22? And boy, the genie was out of the bottle, right? So now the generative AI, now agentic AI is available. Amazingly, we've seen telcos become an early adopter of that technology. And you know telcos, they're very conservative. They haven't been early adopters of anything. But it just so happens that around agentic, it's been a huge change over their more traditional behavior, which is, kind of be a fast follower. And part of that, James, I think it's because, for one, telcos operate large scale contact centers, right? Some of the largest contact centers in the world are run by telcos. They also outsource or become outsourcers or BPOs for a lot of companies. And so they run their own large scale contact centers for other companies. They have a huge incentive to really leverage generative AI in order to kind of streamline and reduce the operational costs of some of these contact centers. So it's definitely a huge technology. It's had a tremendous impact in telco. So I'll give you a couple numbers. All up, we've got around 60,000 or so customers that are using Microsoft generative AI in some way, shape, or form. Right? That could be Copilot. That could be any of the Azure AI Foundry services. Now, 96% of Tier 1 telcos, now the Tier 1s are the largest telcos in every country. 96% of them are using paid Microsoft AI products, right? So that's huge. I'd venture to say that we must have a rounding error, and it's probably 100%, but it's tremendous. And Copilot is leading that adoption channel, right? So we've got huge customers like Vodafone. We all know Vodafone, one of the largest mobile operators in the world. They committed to 68,000 Microsoft 365 Copilot seats. They've been in deployment for a few months, seeing huge ROI and benefits in their deployment. Telstra, another large telco, largest provider in Australia. It's got nearly 30,000 seats. They're in the process of deploying. So it's been, I think, a pretty amazing story around Copilot alone. When we look at some of the other products like Azure AI Foundry, Azure OpenAI Service is one of those key products there. Azure OpenAI Service is the fastest Azure product ever in history, right? Fastest growing. So, a lot of adoption there. And when I look at like my little microcosm of telco, because that's the primary industry that I serve, it's really all about the Tier 1 providers that are deploying solutions. Telefonica is another one, AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, you name it, they're deploying the products. But I think it's really important to mention, all of the partners that are really helping us scale these solutions. You mentioned that, we're obviously very close to GSI partners, but we have partners like Accenture, like Tech Mahindra, TCS, Infosys, to name a few. that are now specializing on both telco and Microsoft AI technologies, kind of bringing their expertise across both domains to our telco customers, helping us scale this generative and agentic AI motion with them.
So, Rick, if as you look at our partners, Tech Mahindra and Accenture and all these many companies we work with, where do you see them providing the largest value for telcos? Where does generative AI and agentic solutions really drive the most impact?
So you're reading my mind. Maybe you might have seen some of the slides. So the way that we kind of look at generative AI and agentic AI and telcos, where can Microsoft and our partner ecosystem really bring the most value to telcos, right? Generative AI and agentic AI is really providing key value. They're really unlocking unprecedented levels of personalization, of performance, of customer engagement. And really, there's an opportunity to change how users experience being on an operator's network. So when we take a look at what again our partners and Microsoft can bring to telcos, it's really across these four distinct pillars that we look at. So, for example, elevating customer experiences. We all know that telcos have been investing dramatically, kind of in improving how they manage their NPS, for example. Optimizing their business operations. How can we automate more of that? More of those line of business applications. Modernizing the network, very distinctly telco, right? They spend upwards of 60% of their operating and capital expenses on building out and operating these networks, and how can they do it more efficiently? And then lastly, around unlocking new revenue streams, right? Telcos are more than just connectivity. James, they've been trying to adapt and to grow and to start providing new services, become digital service providers, not just communication service providers. And in the parlance of the industry, we've been saying they've been going from telcos to techcos for quite a long time. And so how can they create new revenue opportunities with agentic AI and so forth? So if you look at these four areas, or again, enhancing customer satisfaction through like AI-driven support, streamlining their business and their operation support systems, again, with advanced automation, and so forth. Tons of opportunities for partners, both ISVs and GSIs and the like. And go ahead and you have a question.
Yeah, Rick, I got a ping on the side here. You mentioned an acronym MPS. For those of us not in the telco space, could you tell us what that acronym means?
Yeah, it's your net promoter score. Most industries will actually look at NPS specifically as a way to means how well they're doing with their customers. And so NPS is an incredibly valuable metric for telcos, particularly in the contact center.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, I failed to mention a couple others, so I may drop a few acronyms in there. By all means, stop me. BSS, which I mentioned, is Business Support Systems. OSS is Operations Support Systems. These are the line of business applications, essentially the lifeline of telcos as to how they run their business. Essentially, their line of business ops, and they're really, really, very, very important parts of how the telco manage their services. Great opportunities for automating a lot of that mayhem that exists today.
So taking a look at these four verticals, the customer experience is contact center, I presume. Mm-hmm. Business operations is your traditional accounting and finance and receivables, et cetera, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yep.
The network is probably a little bit more unique to the telcos, and the
Indeed.
new revenue streams is that tied to contact center, like next best action, making them an offer, or is it a little different than that?
It's a little different. The next best offer, next best action type of motion, I would classify that more on elevating customer experiences. This is really around how can they reinvent themselves by either creating new products and services that leverage AI capabilities, or maybe expanding their current offerings with AI. So let me give you an example. Telcos run the network. Voice services are their bread and butter, right? That's a carrier voice service, which could be, the PSTN or the fixed line voice service, or it could be a mobile voice service. But the reality is that voice services haven't really changed in decades, right? So you pick up a mobile phone today, you dial a number, you establish a phone conversation, and you just talk. There's really nothing distinctly different between doing that today and doing that 20 years ago, other than maybe you've unplugged from the wall. These kinds of services in the telco world haven't really kept up in terms of modern voice services. If you look at a voice platform like Teams or like Zoom, they have extensive voice capabilities that leverage AI, right? So for example, we can transcribe calls, we can summarize calls, we can create action items on those calls. These are really very, very valuable features that are available on VoIP platforms that haven't yet quite made it to the telco voice services, right? So we're helping telcos kind of transform and reinvent those voice services to begin to keep up really with what their siblings in the UC or voice over IP space have been doing.
So, Rick, as you take a look at these four verticals, which are the ones that are most relevant to transformation or the low-hanging
Right.
fruit for telcos?
Can I say all of them? So, they're all extremely relevant, but I would say that Elevate Customer Experience, has been where most of our action has been in the last couple of years for obvious reasons. One, as I said earlier, telcos have massive contact centers, right? And contact centers happen to be like the front door for generative AI capabilities within pretty much any organization. There's so much natural language that's flowing through the contact center that was kind of the obvious place to experiment. And so a lot of these initial generative AI proof of concepts, pilots, applications were deployed across the contact center itself. Now, most recently, we've seen a lot of the capabilities that telcos learn from deploying, say, generative AI solutions in the contact center start to scale to other parts of their business, whether it's the business operations space, again, automating BSS applications, for example, or into the network. So, for example, creating autonomous networks. This is kind of the North Star for telcos, right? How can they build autonomy across their networks so they can have these kind of configuring types of network experiences where you don't have to rely on thousands and thousands of network administrators and engineers to run. So really across all of them, but I would say most recently that modernizing the network around network autonomy has been probably the most interesting thing and the fastest growing pillar for us at Microsoft.
So, Rick, you opened up with a discussion of the telco industry, right? It's highly regulated. It's been around for 50 years, 100 years. It was one of the original modernizing technologies. So how are they moving into this new age? How are they building? How are they deploying agents across the enterprise? What does that look like?
No, that you've got definitely a great point related to regulation. It's an issue that we look at very, very cautiously, very seriously. Let me answer you the second part of your question first, which is really, how are telcos deploying this, and really how are they doing it alongside partners, right? Or how are they leveraging partners in order to drive that adoption? Keep in mind that AI is not just really a tool; it's an integral part of the user experience, of the user interface that we're creating. It's transforming how we interact with technology and how we interact with each other. Like when you look at since the inception of computers, we've been interacting with computers in their terms, right? We've created hardware, we've created mice and keyboards and monitors and touchscreens in order for us to be able to interact with computers. With Agentic AI now, computers can adapt to interact with us using our own terms, using natural language, using speech, right? Using vision. And so it's pretty exciting. When you kind of fast forward to the impact that's going to have to user interfaces, it's going to be amazing. And so I'll bring you a few examples. But before that, let's say, how are telcos really beginning to move towards agentic? Don't think of agentic as a single, massive, monolithic assistant that you're going to deploy, whether that be Copilot or anything else. The reality is that we have this paradigm where we think that every employee will have an AI assistant, say a Copilot, that kind of will help them be more productive. And every business process, and of course in telco there's thousands of business processes, but every business process will have its own AI agent. And that agent will essentially be a domain expert in that business process, right? It'll understand everything that there is to understand about the flow, the applications that it needs to interact with, the outcomes that it needs to reach, right? It's an expert in that. That AI agent may be autonomous fully, or it could work in conjunction with a human or with other agents, right? So that's kind of the paradigm. How we're seeing telcos move in this direction is really by beginning to implement and deploy AI agents that are experts in different areas, right? They may have one or more AI agents that are experts in customer service, right? They may know how to solve issues, how to open tickets, how to resolve issues, how to summarize case, for example, with a customer. Or you may have a network agent or a network operations agent that really knows how to obtain telemetry from the network. It understands the network topology. It understands the different network elements that are deployed, the network products and brands, whether it's Ericsson or Nokia or Mavini or any other third-party product that's out there, and then be able to help a network administrator or a network engineer be able to more quickly understand the network problem or issue that arises to reduce the mean time to resolve, the MTTR, be able to bring an issue to closure much faster than they could, without the use of an agent. And so you kind of, think of your enterprise and how many, possible domains and areas and business processes you have, and you'll probably easily come into the thousands, right? Some of these are very vertical, like a network agent. Some of them are very horizontal. So for example, a sales agent or an HR agent, procurement agent, and so forth. So there'll be a lot of those types of agents that a person, an employee, will interact on a daily basis, and Copilot will be the front door for them to enable to have those dialogues and conversations with the various agents that exist.
So, Rick, let's talk about the magic word ROI, business value.
Right.
How are telcos thinking about that from the perspective of use cases? And I asked that because I recently saw a Wall Street Journal article where a major pharmaceutical company was described as moving away from endless POCs.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
And focusing in on really the value that agents can bring to the table. So how are telcos looking at that? How are they thinking about that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head on that one. So probably the top story that I've heard from telco CTIOs, CIOs when I have these conversations is, hey, listen, the era of the POCs and pilots is over. We've already proven the capability, mostly around customer care use cases. We now really want to move into outcomes, into actual projects. We're looking for turnkey solutions that solve my problem, not necessarily looking to build things on their own or, as they call them, fair experiments, right? Trying to kind of build something out. So they've recognized the value. They know that the ROI, the actual ROI, sometimes is difficult to compute, but the outcomes are real. And so what they're looking for from their partners, or from their suppliers, their vendors, are really turnkey solutions that really, again, drive outcomes, and not necessarily custom solutions that may take months to build, but more importantly, they need to kind of support long term. So that's the one area that I would say as a GSI, you should be looking at, what kind of value can you provide that addresses those needs? Can you provide more turnkey accelerators that kind of help you reach those outcomes faster? That being some of the very explicit directives that we're getting from telco CIOs. To telcos, I would say, don't limit yourself to like a single strict model or blueprint as to how you envision generative AI and agentic AI being deployed. Listen, we're in a fast-moving train. This technology is moving, million miles a minute. It's difficult to really stay abreast at all the changes. Just about every week, you have some new technology that's being released, and we haven't reached really a level of stability that would enable you to kind of set and cast, one explicit ruling as to how things should work and keep it or maintain that moving forward, just because the technology is changing so rapidly. So for example, when I say don't limit yourself, a lot of the suppliers that you're working with, a lot of the vendors, be it ISVs or GSIs, are creating solutions that are embedding or infusing AI into their products, right? That's going to be one way upon how you're going to be consuming agentic AI experiences within your operations, right? Is by leveraging, again, the AI that your vendors are already infusing into their products. I'll give you an example. In Microsoft 365, you're getting agentic AI experiences all over the place, right? In Teams, you have the ability to, again, transcribe calls and create really nice summaries of what's going on. In Word, you can use agentic AI to help it create new documents. In Outlook, it can summarize long thread emails, etc. These are Copilot or agentic capabilities that we're building into our products, right? Similarly, suppliers like Amdocs are beginning to build these agentic experiences into their own products. ServiceNow is doing the same thing. So leverage those first party vendor solutions that exist. Number two, AI is for everyone within your company. And so you'll have the ability to kind of customize or build some of these capabilities, but don't rely on just a single platform. Meaning, don't think that every generative AI or agentic AI project needs to be created by a data scientist, that sits in a lab somewhere, right? The reality is that even your line of business users, your business analysts have the ability to create agents themselves. We provide platforms like in Copilot 365 or Microsoft 365 Copilot, the agent builder experience, which enables anyone within the company to easily create an agent to perform some task, right? And that doesn't require any coding whatsoever. We provide low-code tools like Copilot Studio that enables, again, a power user to be able to create an agent that even interacts with backend systems, gets data from your CRM, for example, Salesforce or Dynamics, and does something interesting with that. It can interact with tools, again, using a very, very low code type of environment. And then finally, we have, those tools for the AI engineers, for the AI developers and the data scientists, part of our Azure AI Foundry tool set, right? So if you want to create your own capabilities using these, basically pro code development tools, we have that environment there as well. So the point being, don't lock yourself in. There's a lot of options. Technology is changing quickly, use every model that's available to you in order to take the most advantage of agentic AI.
Rick, one of the things that makes telcos a little unique is they do live in a regulatory environment, right? Within a nation's borders, within a nation's government framework.
They do, in fact, yeah.
How should partners think about that? How does that accelerate what they can do, or how does that maybe provide some caution as to what they can do and how they can do it with telcos?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And telcos are highly regulated in some areas more so than others. There's a few things. One, we're working very closely with the regulators in virtually every major country, ensuring that again we provide guidance as to how you can leverage cloud resources, be it AI or any of the other hosting capabilities, in a matter that, again, is meeting their requirements, right? So that's first and foremost. We do understand that there's going to be a need to have better, tighter control of the assets that you deploy into the cloud. And so we've established the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. I'll cite an example. So with Korea Telecom, we recently deployed this Cloud for Sovereignty and they're now specializing in working with us on how you leverage this capability so they can leverage it with their public sector, with their commercial customers in Korea, right? And so that's one means upon how you can do that. Now with Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty, you still are deploying your workloads into the public cloud, and they're just happen to be ring fence. So that they're better managed, right? So you have more or tighter control over, for example, data going in and out of that environment. So you can place proper controls. Now, if you have a need for, say, having those workloads run on premises or run, within the confines of your own four walls, your own data center, we do, have capabilities that enable telcos to do that as well, right? So capabilities with, Azure Local, for example. Which has kind of been it's our new version of the Azure Stack SKUs or products that you might have heard about before, right? So Azure Local essentially enables you to deploy your own, I would say, slice of Azure in your own environment and have full control over what's running within that environment, right? So that's another means as to how you can manage some of those capabilities. And interesting, one other piece that we're now exploring, and we've actually done with a few telcos, because when you're using, say, a large language model, foundation model, most of these just by default will run in the public cloud. In some cases, that's the only location where they'll run, right? But because of regulation, you may be limited as to, for example, you may not be allowed to send PII, private identifiable information, to the cloud. So we have a mechanism for de-identifying data, right, on-prem, right? So, for example, you can do some pre-processing on-prem of that data, de-identify tokenize it, so you're removing it, removing any PII data, replacing it with a token, and then that meets the regulatory requirements, so you can now send that to the public cloud, the Azure OpenAI service as an example, right? So that's another way of handling it. So there's a lot of tools at your disposal. You want to use the right tool, and obviously use the one that's most cost effective to meet the regulatory needs.
So, Rick, that ability to anonymize data and take out the PII, for example,
Yeah.
is that something that the telco is using their knowledge of the regulatory environment, their knowledge
Yeah.
of that region to help us with, or are they kind of a beneficiary of that?
It's a little bit of both, right? I mean, the regulation varies from point A to point B, right? And from industry to industry, right? But for the most part, we understand what PII is. We understand what qualifies as PII, and telcos can take advantage of that. There's also an existing tool set that's kind of pre-built to do that. So we have an open source project called Presidio, which kind of allows you to, essentially, it's a small machine language model that runs on-prem that basically does pre-processing. It understands what identifiable information is, PII is. It's able to tokenize it before you send it to, say, the Azure OpenAI service. And we have partners in this space. So we have a partner called Private.AI, for example, that basically can do that on your behalf as well. So there's a lot of mechanisms that are used to do that, but it's an interesting use case for sure.
Excellent. So, Rick, how should partners look at working with telcos to accelerate the agentic transformation, the agentic modernization of telcos?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, James. One of the things that I mentioned is the telcos are asking for is they want turnkey products, right? They want they want solutions that they can easily bring to market and scale across their organization. For the most part, they're not looking for, again, these large boil the ocean kind of generative or agentic AI projects to really transform their entire business. They want to do so, again, using building blocks, using things that are pre-built, bringing capabilities that are addressing specific outcomes. So as far as what partners can do is, again, start building muscle around that area, start understanding the specific business, whether it's telco or retail or manufacturing, so that you can bring value and, again, bring accelerators or notion that basically ties in or merges the technology, the generative and agentic AI technology, with the business that you have a thorough understanding of. In the case of, I'll mention a partner, Tech Mahindra has a great set of assets that they've built here. They call the Agent X framework, right? And what it does is basically beginning to now expand or provide a set of use cases. They're kind of pre-built using our Azure AI platform, right? So they're not necessarily building things from scratch, but bringing in assets that already kind of get you 80, 90% there. And the biggest bulk of the effort in this case is really integrating, in this case, that Agent X platform with their backend systems, with their backend data, right? And that's fairly routine, right? They're not necessarily having to build or engineer their own prompts or ML models in this case. They're merely, again, integrating some of the backend things that you've already got in place. And so that allows them to kind of get these solutions to market much more rapidly than, again, if they were building something from scratch.
So this goes back to that conversation that we normally have with partners, where they say that they are the trusted advisor for an industry or
Yeah.
for a customer, and I think what I heard you say is that expertise in the industry, that credibility that you already have in the industry,
Right.
allows someone to build something that is 80% there, right? And then go in there and offer it to a telco, build that extra 20% that is unique to the telco, and drive significant value.
100%. And I'll just be totally clear. We rely on partners exactly for that, right? Because we don't necessarily have deep industry experts, across every industry that we serve. We rely on partners being those vertical industry experts, bringing that domain expertise alongside Microsoft technology expertise to meet that customer's problem. And so that's the key driver there. Great point that you've made.
Awesome. Rick, excellent. Any last comments, any words of advice for partners as they look at this space? Any surprises where you've spanned, the spectrum of customers and customer conversations, and
Mhm.
has anything popped where you're like, wow, hadn't thought of that. Partners should be thinking about that.
I'm constantly surprised. Sometimes I go to industry events and I'm chatting with a supplier in this market, and I learned that they're actually building these products on Azure or using Azure AI Foundry, for example. And so a lot of times I'm just surprised when I find new partners that I should have been aware of that they actually had solutions built on our platform. So one thing is, we absolutely are always looking for partners that are building on our stack so that we can have joint go-to-market opportunities and actually build our business concurrently. We do have some pretty awesome first-party capabilities. I mean, we've talked about Copilot and Copilot Studio and Foundry and so forth. But the reality, again, as we were just discussing, we're a platform company, right? Microsoft builds platform. We need partners that build those industry specific solutions on top of that platform, right? And again, we're always looking to expand those partnerships. In telco, we do have partnerships with the top ISVs like Amdocs and Nokia, Blue Planet, and all those. And of course, with GSIs like Accenture and Tech Mahindra, whom I mentioned. But I encourage all of our partners, again, ISV or GSIs alike, to take a look at that terrific Cloud AI Partner Program, right? Because that really kind of helps partners accelerate their Azure adoption, their AI adoption, and so I encourage you as a listener to participate. And if you're a smaller partner, the Microsoft for Startups program that we have is really a phenomenal way of really getting you the resources that you need to be able to host and those AI applications on Azure and to kind of to build our relationship and start building go-to-market activities with us. So a lot of great assets there for you to explore. And my team's always looking, as I said, for new partners that we can introduce to our customers.
Awesome. Awesome. Rick, thank you for spending time with us today. I think the keynote for the audience is let's surprise Rick with some really awesome offers and awesome solutions. And if you see Rick at industry conferences, go off and try to link up with him on LinkedIn, and let's surprise and delight Rick, and let's surprise and delight our customers.
Absolutely, James. Always
All
a
right.
pleasure.
Excellent.